Okay, so get this. We've got a case here, and it's a wild one. Two women are claiming a judgment against them, like a whole judgment, is void.
Void.
Totally void. And it's all because of something a judge in a totally separate case decided.
Oh, wow.
So you're probably thinking, how is that even possible?
Yeah, oh, that's quite a twist.
Well, that's what we're diving into today, folks. Appeals, procedural what-ifs, and a legal strategy that I can only describe as bold.
Definitely piques the curiosity.
It does. It really does. So we're dealing with Agnes Mecurry and Etha Jones. They're representing themselves, and they're going up against Senior Judge Thomas Wright.
I see.
And it's not just, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. They're getting deep into the weeds of the Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure, FRAP.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting. Because what they're doing, it's like they're connecting these dots, right? They're saying, hold on, a decision that Judge Ronnie Greer made in this other case, this 23 CV 141 case, that has a direct impact on what's happening in our appeal. In the Sixth Circuit, that's case 2.23 CV 29.
See, this is why I love a good deep dive. It's legal detective work, basically.
It really is.
So we've got Agnes, we've got Etha holding their own, and their whole argument, at least a big part of it, rests on something called FRAP4A, ASCIIs. Ever heard of it?
Oh, FRAP4A, sure. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically it has to do with Rule 60 motions and how those work when you've got an appeal going on at the same time.
Okay, now you're speaking my language, legalese.
Yeah.
But for our listeners who aren't fluent in that, break it down. What are these rules, and how do they fit into this whole tangled web?
Okay, so imagine you're playing this really high-stakes game, right? And there are, of course, rules, very specific rules. Now, one of those rules lets you hit pause, but only under very specific circumstances. That pause button, that's kind of like a Rule 60 motion. It's basically asking the court to take a step back, look at the judgment again, but only for very specific reasons. And then FRP4A swoops in and says, hey, if you hit that pause button correctly, the whole game, it's got to freeze, everything stops.
So are Agnes and Etha essentially saying the court didn't hit pause when they should have?
Exactly. They're claiming their motion to consolidate several appeals, and we're talking 24-5196, 24-5208, 24-5610, even 24-5786, which was filed August 26, 2024. They're saying it was just overlooked, and that's where things get messy.
Messy, because one of those appeals, 24-5786, got dismissed, right?
Yeah.
October 7th, failure to pay fees. But if they were supposed to be in that pause period because of their other motions, shouldn't the whole shebang have been on hold?
You got it. That's the heart of their argument. Their point is the court, they should have seen those Rule 60 motions, the ones connected to the other appeals, and gone, hold on, FRAP4A6 applies to all of this, including 24-5786. They even go so far as to point out that in that motion to consolidate, they mentioned 24-5786, even though it didn't even have a case number back then.
Smart. So they're setting up this timeline, saying, look, our intentions were clear from the get-go.
Precisely.
So it's not even just about one dismissed appeal anymore. It's bigger than that. It's about how this one potential error, overlooking a motion, and then those rules about suspending appeals, it might point to, well, a much bigger issue, right? One of due process.
Now you're getting it. They're saying this wasn't just a misstep, it's snowballed. And because of that snowball, because of that potential error, 24-5786 got dismissed, putting them at a disadvantage. It's really a case study, a case study in how these really intricate procedures, these rules, they might seem minor, but if they're not followed, they can have huge, huge repercussions. And it gets even wilder, right? Because on top of all this, Agnes and Etha, they bring in this whole other case and this Judge Greer. They're saying, hold on, because of what Judge Greer decided in his case, 23 CV 141, the judgment against us, it's got to be void.
Whoa, slow down. Their argument hinges on a ruling from a completely different case. That's some serious legal maneuvering. What does Judge Greer do that's got them so fired up?
Well, the specifics of 23 CV 141, we're still digging into those. But from what we can tell, Judge Greer, he made a ruling, and that ruling, it directly contradicts a key point, a really important point, in the judgment against Agnes and Etha. So they're basically saying, see, this contradiction, it makes the original judgment against us totally void.
It's like they've found a loose thread, and they're pulling on it, hoping the whole thing unravels. I love it. This is why we do deep dives, these unexpected twists.
And it gets even more intriguing because Agnes and Etha, they actually claim their original motion to consolidate all these appeals. It basically got lost. They're saying it just disappeared on the docket, which just adds to this whole idea that crucial procedural steps were well missed. And get this, they even point out that they reference the appeal that would eventually become 245786 in that motion, even before it had a case number.
So they're building their case step by step, showing they had this all planned from the beginning. They're not letting any details slip by. But it makes you wonder, right? If a motion can just get overlooked like that, what does it say about the system? Especially for those who don't have a lawyer, who are navigating this all on their own.
It's a really good question, and it really underscores the challenges that pro se litigants face. They don't have that same experience, that same knowledge to navigate these procedurals, and let's be honest, sometimes very confusing rules.
It's like sending someone into a maze blindfolded, hoping they find their way out. Okay, so we've got overlooked motions, we've got these rules about pausing appeals, and then there's this whole concept of judicial immunity. How does that play into all of this, especially with Agnes and Etha alleging misconduct?
Yeah, judicial immunity, it's complicated, but basically it's meant to protect judges from being sued every time someone doesn't like a decision they made. Think of it as a shield. Allows judges to do their jobs without constantly worrying about being dragged into court themselves.
So even if mistakes were made, even if things weren't done exactly by the book, judicial immunity could protect the judge.
That's the general idea, but it's not a foolproof shield. There are exceptions, of course. Like if a judge acts totally outside of their power, or if what they did has nothing to do with their job as a judge, then that immunity might not protect them.
Okay, so there's a chance, maybe a slim chance, but a chance that Agnes and Etha, they might be onto something with this argument. They're really trying to poke holes in that judicial immunity armor.
Exactly. What they're arguing is that the violations they're claiming, like mishandling those motions, not applying FRI 4 correctly, those are more administrative things, not really judicial decisions. So maybe, just maybe, those actions fall outside that immunity shield.
They're pushing the envelope for sure. Bold move. But wait, there's more, right? Don't they also call out opposing counsel, this Jeffrey Ward, claiming he's taking advantage of this whole situation?
Oh yeah, they definitely don't hold back there. They specifically mention a motion to dismiss that Jeffrey Ward filed October 7th, 2024, which just happens to be the same day their appeal 245786 got dismissed for those unpaid fees. They seem to be hinting at, a pattern here, like their case is being disregarded and opposing counsel is using it to his advantage.
It's like they're stuck in this legal tug of war and the court's holding the rope.
It's definitely a tangle, that's for sure. And on top of it all, remember, Agnes and Etha, they're doing this all on their own. They even mention, right, that they shouldn't even have to pay fees for that 245786 appeal because, get this, their other appeals, they're covered under something called IFP, in forma pauperis.
IFP rings a bell, but give me a little refresher. What's that all about?
Basically, IFP, it's there to help people who can't really afford all those court fees, It lets them move forward with their case without having to shell out a ton of money up front. It's really important. Make sure that justice isn't only for those with deep pockets.
Which makes this whole dismissal for unpaid fees thing even more head-scratching, right? I mean, if their other appeals were covered under IFP, wouldn't that one have been too?
Exactly, and that's another thing they're fighting. It seems like their IFP status, it got revoked by the district court judge, but their argument is that because they filed that Rule 60 motion, remember that whole pause button we talked about?
Yeah.
They're saying that DA should have put everything on hold, IFP situation included.
Right, so their argument is the court should have factored that in, especially with those other motions still up in the air. It just goes to show all these procedures, they're all intertwined. One little detail can have huge ripple effects.
Exactly. And you know what? This isn't just about a dismissed appeal or a misplaced motion. This goes deeper. This is about due process, a fundamental legal principle. They're saying the court's handling of their case, especially those procedural hiccups we talked about, those infringed on their right to a fair hearing.
Wow, and they're standing up for themselves, challenging a system that often feels, let's be honest, designed to be confusing, especially for those without that legal background. Pretty inspiring, actually.
Absolutely. They're meticulously building their argument, using the rules to point out where they believe the court didn't follow those same rules. Makes you think, what does a fair justice system really look like, especially if these seemingly small slip-ups can have such a huge impact?
It's a good question, and one we should all be asking. We often think about the law as this cut and dry thing, but this case, this just shows how much gray area there really is. It's about access. It's about what it takes to represent yourself. And yeah, it's about how even small mistakes, those can have massive consequences.
It reminds us that behind all those case numbers, those legal terms, there are people, like Agnes and Etha, trying to find their way, often in a system that feels designed to be daunting. Their story, no matter the outcome, it highlights just how important it is to understand your own rights, to speak up, and to never be afraid to question things, even, or maybe especially, those things we think of as unshakable.
This deep dive, it's been quite a ride. A reminder that law isn't just some abstract idea, it's real life with real consequences. We've got a lot to think about. Fairness, access, and that delicate balance between following the rules and, actually achieving true justice.